1. So to give you some background on the house, I lived in an apartment, but we owned the entire building. Downstairs we owned 3 businesses, a chiropractor's office, my dad is a chiropractor, a health food store, and we rented the 3rd place to an art teacher, who opened up an art studio called Art World. Eventually she moved, but we continued to call the place Art World, even though we only used it as a storage room for the remainder of the time I lived there. We lived upstairs. It was a somewhat small apartment with 2 bedrooms. Not really small, but I live in a family of 6 or so of us. It was way small for us. We pretty much sacrificed every room to be a bedroom by the time I moved away because there were so many of us. Anyways, the place was super old. The walls had cracks, the floor creaked. There was a history of old people dying in the house. Just of old age, nothing weird. But we 100% had a ghost. No one in my family believes otherwise, even my father, who is extremely skeptical of anything paranormal. Okay, so, the first 2 occurrences happened before I was born. On one occasion, my parents couldn't find their keys anywhere. I mean, they looked upstairs, in the office, in Art World, in their car, everywhere. They searched for like 30 minutes. Finally, my mom goes into the back bathroom and sees the blow dryer is on. It had already burned through some makeup, and if they would have left it, it would have burned down the whole house. She turns it off and goes into the next room, their bedroom. The bed was made, they didn't make it, and in the middle of the bed are their keys, stacked one on top of the other, like a single line. Another time was when my mom went into labor with me. Something shook my dad awake violently and said, "Get up! Your wife is going into labor!" So, he jumped out of bed and my mom came from the next room and said, "Honey, I think my water broke." Both my sister and I were 100% convinced Santa was real, because when we were young, we both were convinced we saw him. When I was like 8, I was sleeping in my parents' room in between them. They were both next to me asleep, when I saw your stereotypical Santa walk through, even with his bag full of presents. My sister was sleeping on the floor and she saw his boots pass by her. Even when my mom told us he wasn't years later, both of us were like, "Nah, Mom, you're wrong, we saw him." Also, I was sleeping in my bed one night around this age, and I woke up to see a little girl hovering over my desk, just staring at me. As I got older, the activity got more persistent. Every night at 2 a.m. exactly, I would hear footsteps coming from my parents' room to the kitchen. Their lights would turn on and sometimes the water would run. My room was directly across from the kitchen, and I never saw anyone enter or leave it while this would happen. Even then, of course, I always assumed it was one of them getting up. But I would go over to the kitchen and see nobody in there ever. I would also ask to see if either of them had gotten up, and they would both say no. Down in Art World, things always seemed to happen to me. Once I got chalk thrown at my head. I was the only one down there. Another time I heard someone come down the stairs. The apartment upstairs has a door to Art World, and come over to my ear and whisper, "Christine," really loudly. I turned around and no one was there. I swear to God I've never screamed so loud in my life. One day I was homesick and I got a call from my mom asking me to stop stomping around on the other side of the house from my bedroom. But I had not gotten out of bed yet. I can't even name you the amount of cameras I bought, because I was convinced they were all broken. There were weird giant orbs of light in all of my pictures. Of course, now I know it was just the house. At the end of our time there, I started sleeping in my parents' room because I got so scared. Keep in mind I was 15. Sometimes there I would wake up in the middle of the night and see a dark figure standing at the end of my parents' bed, staring at them. Being alone in that house became impossible for me. All in all, I'm so glad we moved out. Our new house is not haunted at all. And I can't say I miss feeling like I was being watched 24/7. I hope you guys had fun reading about my childhood ghost. Sure wasn't too fun for me. 2. For context, we have a hill in our city. It's pretty giant, littered with walking tracks everywhere. It would take hours to completely circle it on foot, so it's pretty big. It's gated off so no cars can get in. I walk my dog over there every day for about an hour, keeping entertained with my headphones, usually around 4:30 p.m. I recently got a part-time job at a post office though, so I work from 3 to 5, that's the busiest time of the day, and obviously I can't walk my dog at 4:30, since I'd be at work. Because of this, I'm walking her at 5:30 to 6, and by that time it's either sunset or completely dark. I'm comfortable with this darkness, and I bring a torch so I don't trip over any of the holes or something. I know the place like the back of my hand, so that's not an issue. I've also been seeing things over there though. The first couple times everything was okay, but then one time when I was walking home, I saw an extremely tall, completely black figure. I felt like I knew where its eyes were. I was staring right at that one area. But I couldn't see anything there. I quickly turned to the left, and when I looked back, it was gone. Many times I have heard a dragging behind me, and it's only when my music is up too loud for me to hear it completely. If I get scared or worried and turn down my music, it suddenly stops. I know it's not anything to do with the music itself, because I've listened to it all hundreds of times and haven't heard anything like that. Could be animals, but it still shakes me up. About half an hour ago I was walking home in the near darkness when I saw a person standing probably 20 to 30 meters in front of me on the same path. My dog's ridge, she's a ridgeback and boxer cross, was completely up, which doesn't happen often, but I assumed it was because it was dark. The person wasn't moving. I turned my music down a little, I'm self-conscious about strangers hearing my music over my headphones, and continued walking. When I saw the person slowly walk behind a tree they were standing beside, I was a little unnerved and turned my music down almost all the way. I was also really confused. I was wondering whether it was a kidnapper, a murderer, or what. I could still see them from behind the tree. It was only so thin. So I just stared at them to make myself feel safer. I continued staring at them, even just before I passed them. Then, while I passed them, I waited for a second, and then turned around to look at them. But the dark figure was completely gone. I was so sure I didn't imagine it. I turned back and searched the area as best I could. There was nothing there that could be mistaken for a person, and it was still pretty light out. I can honestly say that I was terrified and walked home as quickly as possible. Finally, just before I got home one time, I noticed a person standing in the middle of the wide open area where the kangaroos usually eat grass. I ignored it and kept walking on the path, then turned back out of curiosity, and the figure was gone. It was still only sunset. There was no trees or anything I could have mistaken for a person, and there is no way they could have possibly gotten out of that area that quickly. I'm not sure what they are. They scare me and make me feel paranoid when I walk the rest of the way home with my headphones off in silence. It's weird because I never notice anything when I'm walking deeper into the bush, only when I'm walking home. It's not the time of day that affects it, because sometimes I start my walks late and see nothing while I'm walking deeper in. Any advice or whatever else that people can provide will be extremely helpful, because I don't want to have to be scared to walk my dog. 3. Ever since I was born, I've been prone to paranormal incidents. While I have many unexplained events in my life, growing up at my dad's house was the scene for most of my events. In 2000, when my parents were still married, they purchased their first home. It was in a more quiet section of town at the time. The house is beautiful, and it was the only house on the street made of stone. On the day they bought the house, we got a tour from the owners. The guy explained to my family the house was built in 1947, making it one of the older homes. The house even has a historical name, as it's named after the man who built it. On the tour, I was excited. I was going on 6 years old, and the thought of finally having neighborhood friends excited me. I remember feeling happy going through the house. After touring the basement and the main level of the house, we made our way to the second floor. However, this is where my good feeling went slightly askew. We first entered the room that would be my parents' room. It was rather bland, but it still felt normal. We went across the hallway to what would be me and my siblings' room. As we entered, I immediately felt like I was being watched. For some weird reason, the owners only had a gargoyle statue in the room. Everything else was bare. I tried to brush it off as me being paranoid. But the paranoia continued all through the first night there. I remember trying to peacefully sleep, but I kept feeling like someone could see me. My brother was sleeping peacefully. I kept feeling urges to go to the closet. It was the one part of the room we did not explore during the tour. When I woke up the next day, I asked my parents to look into it. My mother did not like the small door leading into the attic inside the closet, so she sealed the small door shut. This door would stay sealed all while my parents were married. In 2003, my parents divorced. My mom moved out, and my dad kept the house. They did weak custody, so I'd see my dad every other week. Because my mom was not there, I had access to explore the attic. Me, my brother, and our friend decided to explore one day. We found out the attic was also a passage between my room and, at the time, my brother's room, as my dad made his room in the old dining room. We found a box of weird shapes in the closet. We buried the objects in the yard, thinking nothing of it. When I went in my room the next day, that's when fear started to hit me. I was playing with my Barbies on my bed. I was having fun when suddenly a giant chunk of my ceiling fell off. It came down in the exact spot I was sitting, so I jumped off my bed. It managed to slightly cut my hand, but it was nothing major. When I told my dad, he couldn't figure out what could have caused this, as the ceiling was fine before. I was also on the top floor, so there was no water pipe above me. That same night was the night I saw a man. I was reading a comic when I heard a door knocking noise coming from inside my closet. I panicked and immediately flew under the covers. Peering through a crack in my blanket, I watched the doorknob of my closet door turn. I shut off my lamp and switched positions so I was facing the wall. I heard the door creak open, and the feeling of being watched made the hairs on my neck stand up. I knew where the figure was. It was a shadow man hiding in the back corner of my room. That night I kept my eyes shut tight. From that night on, I never felt welcomed in my own room. 2 years later, my stepsister had my old room. She woke up from a nap, screeching and crying. I ran upstairs to grab her. When I got her outside, she described a weird shadow man looking at her from a corner of the bedroom. I told my dad and my stepmom, and they looked at me like I was speaking Spanish. I was the only one who believed my stepsister. I thought this was over, until my half-sister got my stepsister's room. Every night, she'd enter my dad and stepmom's room crying about the guy in her bedroom. She'd tell us how her toys would get flung or toys would randomly turn on. My stepmom soon believed her when she found a picture of her while she was pregnant in the room. Right by her, there was a clear-as-day blue orb. She asked me about everything that happened to me in there. To this day, only my stepmom and siblings believe me. This room is always a different temperature than the rest of the house. If you enter it, you can immediately feel pressure. It's still my sister's room, but she just tries to sleep with nightlights. I'm not sure what is in this room, or why it wants to harass me and my siblings. but it's the only area of the house with paranormal activity. I felt the need to share my experience with a community of people who may understand what I went through. 4. These events happened in 2011 through 2012, while I was still living in my parents' house. I was forced to attend church and I identified as a Christian, but didn't practice the faith. I only went because I had to. Through some friends in high school, I found out about the act of meditation. I enjoyed the experience and began to practice meditation daily. After some time, I began to notice weird abnormalities while meditating. Sometimes I would hear a light scream in my head that would slowly pick up in volume, always sounding like, "Ah!" The scream would also pick up in pitch as it went on, and I would always just shake it off, viewing it as just another side effect of meditation. I would also see disturbing images in my head. I should say that my parents' house always gave me an uneasy feeling since the day we moved in early 2001. I always felt like I was being watched. The atmosphere was always that of dread, and at night, it felt like you could cut the air with a knife. One night, for some reason, I just decided to pray. I don't know what I prayed about, and I can't remember why I did. I never sincerely prayed a day in my life. Instantaneously as I prayed, I received chills throughout my entire body, and for some reason, tilted my head up to look into the hallway outside my bedroom. There in the hallway was a tall, pitch-black figure staring back at me. He was well over 6 feet tall and appeared to be wearing a long trench coat that covered his entire body. He also wore a hat resembling a cavalier. Keep in mind, there was no light on in the hallway. The figure was literally darker than pitch black, almost as if it was its own realm of existence. It looked like it was drawing in energy. As quickly as it appeared, it vanished. It was almost as if it could not approach me at the time, as if it were cast away from me. I told a few friends of mine my experience, but no one seemed to believe me. I would still feel the sensation of being watched, especially now that I knew it was there. Over the span of the last year I lived at the house, a few friends had actually seen it while staying the night. One incident, my friend woke me up because she noticed it was standing in the corner of the room she was staying in, just staring at her. Another friend saw it in the same hallway that I did. I've done some research, and it seems that people call these things shadow people. The only other interaction I had with the shadow person happened one night while I was trying to sleep. I was staring into the hallway in which I saw it, and changed positions to get more comfortable, when something came and sat on my bed. I felt the bed sink down by my feet, causing me to actually shift towards it. As I turned around to see what was there, the bed went back to normal, and I didn't see anything. Has anyone had any similar experiences? 5. When I was young, 5 to 10 years old, I always heard the washing machine turn on and go crazy. I found this really annoying and always felt uncomfortable. Nobody else had this happening to them, and nobody really cared for it when I tried to explain it and tell them I was uncomfortable. It always happened when I was upstairs alone and in bed. Also, always, when I walked past it. We've eventually gotten a new washing machine because this one got old, and since then it didn't happen anymore. When I was 8, I think, my grandpa was very sick, and in this place where people rest their last days. My mom went out the door to visit him, and sometime after she left, I saw this heart monitor, heard beeping, and showing the heartbeat getting weaker and weaker, eventually becoming one long beep and one straight line. Shortly after, my mom texted that Grandpa had just died. After the funeral, I witnessed my grandpa several times, sightings and presence. I then started witnessing a lot of spirit stuff, of others everywhere. I finally got help from a very well-skilled woman. She also helped my older niece, who had the exact same experience and stories as I had. She told me after I was fully helped and over with it. My mom and I hear each other when something is going on. She wakes up when I'm uncomfortable at night, and hears me, thinks of me when something is happening to me. And I also hear and feel her when something is happening to her. I find this pretty cool. 2 years ago, when I was 17, I was home alone sitting downstairs in the evening watching TV. I suddenly heard knocking on the back window. Nobody could really be there since we have a closed-off garden. I first tried to ignore it, since I heard it twice before on other days, but it didn't stop. When I looked, I didn't see anyone or anything weird. Also looked but didn't find anything that could explain it. As it kept knocking and didn't stop, I decided to eventually just go upstairs, because I didn't feel comfortable with it. Haven't experienced it ever since. About 1.5 years ago, I woke up and heard this very loud banging and stuff fall over. I sleep in the attic, and my normal room is on the first floor. Both small rooms, my brothers both have a big normal room. I was scared shitless and too scared to look down to my other room, being afraid and pretty sure there was something down there, standing by the stairs, looking up at me. I texted my mom, and her being suddenly awake, she came upstairs and stepped into my room. I felt the whole weird feeling fade away, and she indeed found stuff that had fallen over. Well, it shouldn't have. But I figured anything can fall over at some point, so I didn't and don't think too much of it. My boyfriend doesn't know about this, by the way. I don't want him to think I am weird or superstitious. I just kind of let it go every time something happens. At least it is by far not as present and clear as the time my grandfather passed. It doesn't really bother me. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 58. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Now, what was I saying the other day there? Yes, I was going to mention I'm having some computer troubles. I built this new PC, fancy new thing, much more powerful than the one I'm currently working on. The idea was I was going to take my time, and once it was fully ran in, I was going to then basically switch over to use that as my main machine, as my work machine. And the one I've currently got, which is that would go in the living room. That'd just be used for, browsing around the internet and watching Netflix and stuff. That was the plan. But I've been getting little problems with this new one. It's quite irritating, actually, especially when you consider what it costs to build a new PC. Even doing the work myself, it's still not cheap. So, well, I won't give you a big long list of all the problems I've got with it. But I've pretty much narrowed it down to being a faulty motherboard, and it's outside the time where I could just call up Amazon and get it replaced. I think that expired in April, so I'm probably going to have to contact Asus, and get them to either fix it or more likely replace it. So those problems with the motherboard are quite literally slowing me up. Because if it was working properly, I could be using that to make my videos on, and I'd be done much, much quicker. Well, I'll get it sorted eventually, I'm sure. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.